Adina woke up to the sound of her alarm clock. It was another school day at Kings and Queens College. She quickly had her bath and stood in front of her mirror looking at herself. At 17, she was in her final year of secondary school with big dreams for her future. As she got dressed in her school uniform, she heard her mother's voice from downstairs. "Adina, breakfast is ready." "Coming, Mom," Adina called back. She went downstairs to find her parents already at the table. Her father, Pastor Whale, was reading his Bible while her mother served breakfast. "Good morning, Dad." "Good morning, Mom," Adina said as she sat down. "Good morning, sweetheart," her father replied, looking up from his Bible. "Ready for school?" Adina nodded, starting to eat her breakfast. Her mother sat down next to her. "Adina, your father and I want to talk to you about something important." Adina looked up, curious. "What is it, Mom?" "Adina," Mrs. Wade began, her voice gentle but firm. "Your father and I want to remind you about the importance of focusing on your studies. You're in your final year now, and the university matriculation exams are coming up." Adina resisted the urge to roll her eyes. She knew what was coming next. "And remember," her father added, "there's time for everything. Your studies should be your priority now. Boys can wait." "I know, Dad," Adina said, trying to keep the exasperation out of her voice. "You've told me 100 times." Mrs. Whale patted her hand. "We just want what's best for you, dear. But if you must go out with a boy, he should be a good boy from a Christian home." Adina nodded, finishing her breakfast quickly. "I understand. I need to go now, or I'll be late for school." Her parents smiled, satisfied with her response. After breakfast, Adina left for school. As she walked, she thought about her parents' words. She knew they meant well, but sometimes she felt they didn't trust her to make her own decisions. At the school gate, Adina saw her best friend, Amanda, waiting for her. "Adina," Amanda waved. "Over here." Adina smiled and walked over. "Hi, Amanda. How are you?" "I'm good," Amanda replied. "Did you finish the math homework?" Adina nodded. "Yeah, it was tough though. Did you?" Amanda looked sheepish. "Not really. Can I copy yours?" Before Adina could answer, they heard a voice calling out, "Adina, Amanda." They turned to see Fred jogging towards them. Fred was tall, handsome, and one of the most popular boys in school. He was also a regular at the Christian Students' Fellowship, which is where Adina had first met him. "Hi, Fred," Adina said, feeling a flutter in her stomach. Fred smiled at her. "Good morning, Adina. You look nice today." Adina blushed. "Thanks, Fred." Amanda looked between them and grinned. "Well, I'll leave you two alone. See you in class, Adina." As Amanda walked away, Fred turned to Adina. "So, are you going to the fellowship meeting after school today?" Adina nodded. "Yes, I'll be there. You?" "Of course," Fred said. "Maybe we could walk home together after." Adina hesitated. She thought about her parents' words that morning. But Fred was a good Christian boy, right? Surely her parents would approve. "Okay," she said. "That sounds nice." The school day passed quickly. After the last bell, Adina and Fred walked together to the Christian Students' Fellowship meeting. The room was already full of students when they arrived. The fellowship meeting was inspiring as always. The group leader, Brother John, spoke about the importance of staying true to one's faith in the face of worldly temptations. It was a powerful message, and Adina felt a renewed sense of commitment to her beliefs. After the meeting, Fred approached Adina. "Ready to walk home?" Adina smiled. "Yes, let's go." As they walked, Fred talked about his plans for the future. "I want to study law at university," he said. "What about you, Adina?" "I'm thinking about medicine," Adina replied. "But I'm not sure yet." Fred nodded. You'd make a great doctor. You are so kind and caring. Adina blushed at the compliment. They walked in silence for a while. Then Fred spoke again. Adina, I really like you. I was wondering, would you like to be my girlfriend? Adina's heart raced. She had been hoping Fred would ask her this, but now that he had, she felt nervous. I like you too, Fred, she said. But my parents are very strict about dating. Fred looked disappointed. I understand, but we could keep it a secret for now, just until we're ready to tell them. Adina thought about it. It didn't feel right to keep secrets from her parents, but Fred was such a good boy, and she really liked him. Okay, she said finally, but we have to be careful. Fred's face lit up. He leaned in and gave her a quick kiss on the cheek. Thank you, Adina. You won't regret it. As Adina watched Fred walk away, she felt a mix of excitement and worry. Was she doing the right thing? Over the next few weeks, Adina and Fred spent more and more time together. They would meet between classes, eat lunch together, and always walk home after school. One day, as they were sitting in the school garden during lunch break, Fred took Adina's hand. Adina, he said, I've been thinking. My parents are going out of town this weekend. Maybe you could come over to my house. We could study together. Adina felt uncomfortable. I don't know, Fred. Being alone in your house, it doesn't seem right. Fred looked hurt. Don't you trust me, Adina? I thought you were my girlfriend. I do trust you, Adina said quickly. It's just, my parents would never allow it, Fred sighed. Your parents don't have to know. Come on, Adina. Don't you want to spend time with me? Adina bit her lip. She did want to spend time with Fred. And it was just studying, right? What harm could it do? Okay, she said finally, but just for a little while. Fred smiled and kissed her cheek. Great. It'll be fun, I promise. As Adina walked to her next class, she couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. Was she making the right decision? That Saturday, Adina told her parents she was going to Amanda's house to study. The lie made her feel guilty, but she pushed the feeling aside. When she arrived at Fred's house, he greeted her with a big smile. Come in, he said, taking her hand. My parents won't be back until late tonight. They went to Fred's room and sat on his bed. Fred pulled out his textbooks. So, what should we study first? He asked. But as they started to read, Fred kept getting distracted. He would touch Adina's hand or brush her hair back from her face. Fred, Adina said, feeling uncomfortable. We should focus on studying. Fred put his book down. Adina, we've been together for a while now. Don't you think it's time we, took things further? Adina felt her heart start to race. What do you mean? Fred leaned in and kissed her. At first, Adina kissed back. But then Fred's hand started to wander and she pulled away. Fred, stop, she said. We can't do this. Fred looked frustrated. Why not? Don't you love me? Of course I love you, Adina said. But I made a promise to stay pure until marriage. You know that. I know, Fred said, his voice low. But Adina, come on. We're not living in old times. And we're in love, aren't we? Surely God would understand if we expressed that love. Adina felt tears in her eyes. Fred, please understand. This is important to me. Fred shook his head. I think you should leave. Adina grabbed her book and ran out of the house, crying. As she walked home, she felt confused and hurt. Was Fred right? Was she being old-fashioned? The next day at school, Adina avoided Fred. She ate lunch with Amanda instead. What's wrong? Amanda asked, noticing Adina's sad face. Did you and Fred have a fight? Adina nodded, then told Amanda everything that had happened. Amanda listened, then shook her head. "Oh, Adina," Amanda said when she finished. "Boys like Fred are the hottest in school. I'm surprised he's still with you. Girl, you have to hook him with your body. It's not a big deal sleeping with him. Everyone at school is doing it." Adina was shocked. "But Amanda, I made a promise to stay pure." Amanda rolled her eyes. "Grow up, Adina. Everyone is doing it. It's not a big deal." Adina left lunch feeling even more confused. Was Amanda right? Was she risking losing Fred over this? That afternoon, Fred approached her after class. "Can we talk?" he asked. Adina nodded and they went to an empty classroom. "I'm sorry about yesterday," Fred said. "I shouldn't have pressured you." "I love you, Adina. I want to be with you in every way." Adina felt torn. She loved Fred too, and she was afraid of losing him. "I love you too," she said finally. "But intimacy at this age has consequences." "What about pregnancy or STDs?" Fred scoffed. "I'm clean, Adina. Where would STDs come from? And I can take care of you if anything happens." Adina took a deep breath. I come over after school, if you still want me to." Fred's face lit up. "Really? You mean it?" Adina nodded, trying to ignore the worried feeling in her stomach. "Yes, I mean it." As they walked to Fred's house that afternoon, he talked excitedly about their future. "We'll graduate next year, take the JAM exams together, go to the same university," he said happily. "And then, right after that, we'll get married. It will be perfect, Adina." It did sound perfect. Adina's heart was beating fast as they went into Fred's empty house. This was it. There was no turning back now. In Fred's room, Adina stood awkwardly, not sure what to do. Fred came close to her, looking into her eyes. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. Adina nodded, not trusting herself to speak. What happened next was a blur. Afterwards, Adina felt numb. She got dressed quickly and left, barely saying goodbye to Fred. As she walked home, she felt dirty and ashamed. How could she face her parents now? How could she face God? 2 weeks passed. Adina tried to act normal, but she felt different. She was always tired and she couldn't concentrate in class. One Saturday morning, as her family was having their usual morning devotion, Adina suddenly felt sick. She ran to the bathroom and threw up. A few minutes later, she had a knock on the door. "Adina," it was her mother. "Are you okay?" Adina opened the door, feeling weak and dizzy. Her mother looked at her pale face and frowned. "Adina," Mrs. Wales said, her voice very calm. "Is there something you need to tell me?" Adina shook her head, confused. "What do you mean, Mom?" Mrs. Wales' eyes narrowed. "Who is responsible?" she demanded. "Responsible for what?" Adina asked, her heart beating very fast. "You're pregnant, Adina." Mrs. Wales' voice got louder. "Tell me who's responsible now." Adina felt like the floor was spinning. Pregnant, but it was just one time. How could this happen? The next few hours were full of tears, angry words, and painful silences. Mr. and Mrs. Wales were very upset. They took Adina to the hospital, where the doctor confirmed their worst fears. "How could you do this, Adina?" her father asked, sounding very disappointed. "After everything we taught you." Adina couldn't stop crying. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." She had never felt so ashamed in her life. Fred's reaction was even worse. When Adina told him about the pregnancy, he looked shocked. "Are you sure it's mine?" he asked. Adina couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Of course it's yours, Fred. You're the only one I've ever been with." I don't know what to say," he stammered. "But I take responsibility, Adina. I promise." The days that followed were the hardest of Adina's life. Her parents were angry, but also worried about her. They thought about sending her to live with Fred, But his parents were out of the country. Living alone with Fred and his brothers would only make things worse. Word spread quickly at school. People whispered when Adina walked by. Her teachers looked at her with pity or disappointment. Even Amanda, who had encouraged her to sleep with Fred, now avoided her. "I can't believe you were so stupid," Amanda said when Adina confronted her. "When someone gives you advice, you don't have to do everything they say. Didn't you know how to protect yourself as a lady?" As the weeks passed, Adina's pregnancy became more visible. She had to drop out of school altogether. For a while, it seemed like Fred meant what he said. He visited Adina often, talking about their future and how they would face this together. "I'm so sorry, Adina," he'd say, "but we'll get through this together. My parents will be back soon and we'll figure something out." Months passed, Adina's belly grew, and her dreams of university education seemed to slip further and further away. The time came for the university matriculation examinations. All the senior students took it, except for the heavily pregnant Adina. Fred scored one of the highest marks and was instantly accepted into a prestigious university to study law. He shared the news with Adina, his eyes shining with excitement. "This doesn't change anything between us," he promised. "I'll come visit every weekend. And once the baby is born, we'll figure out how you can join me at university." Adina nodded, trying to share in his enthusiasm. But a part of her couldn't help but wonder, how were they going to manage a baby and university at the same time? But as the weeks passed, things started to change. Fred's visits became less frequent. He stopped calling as much. Adina tried to tell herself it was because he was busy getting stuffs ready for school, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. One day, Adina decided to go to Fred's house. She hadn't heard from him in days and was worried. But when she got there, the house looked empty. The gateman saw her and came over. "Are you looking for Fred?" he asked. Adina nodded. "Yes." "Is he home?" The gateman shook his head. "No, miss. Fred left for university yesterday. Didn't he tell you?" Adina felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. University? Fred had left without even saying goodbye. The gateman handed her a brown envelope. "He left this for you," he said. With shaking hands, Adina opened the envelope. Inside was a short letter. "Dear Adina, I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. As you can see, I still have my whole future ahead of me. I hope you understand. Fred." Adina fell to her knees, crying harder than she ever had before. She felt betrayed, alone, and scared. As she sat there on the ground, holding Fred's letter, Adina realized how much her life had changed. She had broken her promise, lost herself, disappointed her parents, and now the boy she thought loved her had abandoned her.